Britain and the EU are just about to set off into 2 years of intense negotiation, what is being called the hardest in British history, to sort out 2 things. The first being Britain's exit deal. What will UK-EU relations look like in terms of immigration, law, financial rules, fishing, and all other aspects including defence? Already, certain issues have come up, with Gibraltar and Scotland as well as Europol. The divorce will be messy, but it's up to both sides as to how messy and in what time period. From the UK's perspective, we want a quick, reasonable divorce that isn't too costly and separates us from EU law. But the EU's perspective seems to be increasingly punitive, one which is vindictive, nasty, and politically motivated.
You're behaving like the mafia.
The cliché of putting one's party before one's country applies to the EU. They're putting their project above the peoples of Europe's interests. Let's look at EU motives and plans. Ever since the creation of the euro, it has been clear that the project is above all else. Economically, the euro has been a disaster. If you can't control monetary and fiscal policy, in other words interest rates and the ability to tax and spend, then it's impossible to run an economy efficiently. Just look at how vastly different the Greek and German economies are. Why would anyone want them to share a currency? Well, the EU does. Despite the poverty, mass unemployment, rise of neo-Nazi groups, and huge public debt. So what trumps all of these problems? The project, of course. The project above all else.
People are saying, we don't want that flag, we don't want the anthem, we don't want this political class, we want the whole thing consigned to the dustbin of history.
That's where Brexit comes in. It's the first time in EU history that they've seen a major threat from the inside, where they can't just ignore the referendum result. So what has the EU said in terms of Brexit? Well, according to the Brexit negotiation plans voted through in the EU Parliament with a 500 to 100 majority, the EU want to give the UK no competitive advantage in a trade deal. That means forcing us to keep burdensome EU regulations which cripple innovation, one reason the UK voted to leave in the first place. Plus, they have said they want us to pay a €60 billion exit deal. This must be agreed before any negotiations can even start.
50. There is no reason to pretend that this is a happy day.
But they don't concede that the £200 billion we have ploughed into the project has meant that they owe us a big chunk of EU assets and shares in buildings such as the European Parliament. They have clearly plucked this figure out of thin air, as it was never mentioned during the referendum. You would have thought the Remain campaign would have used such a figure, but they never did. Why? Because it's a very recent invention aimed at punishing Britain for leaving their project. The EU have also said they will negotiate as one. You see, 27 countries will all be represented by Europhilic radicals like Guy Verhofstadt, who Nigel Farage once said this about.
And on behalf of the European Parliament, we've got Guy Verhofstadt. He's the man who's going to be negotiating Brexit. And if you were to think of this building as a temple, well, Mr Verhofstadt is the high priest, a fanatic. In fact, there is only one real nationalist in the room, and it's you. Because you want flags, anthems, armies, you are an EU nationalist. And I frankly think that this appointment amounts to pretty much a declaration of war on any sensible negotiating process.
EU negotiators have one thing in mind, the future of their precious union, so they don't want a quick free trade deal. As they have stated, our divorce settlement must be reached before any trade talks start. This proves they don't care about the peoples of Europe, many of whose jobs, wages and businesses rely on UK trade. We have a huge trade deficit with the EU, meaning they rely on the UK market much more than we rely on the EU's market. With no free trade deal, this could mean the loss of thousands of jobs with German car manufacturers or French wine producers. Then we get to Gibraltar. Despite the pledge of acting as one, they have given Spain an absolute veto on any trade deal with the UK if they are unhappy with the sovereignty of Gibraltar. Well, if you thought that was petty and hypocritical, apparently the EU can go even lower. They're even trying to prevent the UK from making any trade links or talks with any other countries around the world during the Brexit talks. Why? Well, there is no reason, apart from trying to restrict our economy and hurt UK jobs. What does it matter to the EU who we sign free trade deals with? They're trying to impose their laws on us. They're trying to control us, and they want to punish us. What's the solution? Well, that's for another video. Thank you for watching, and subscribe for more Brexit content.